So that's what projection does. Projection sells your power so that you have the right to be righteously indignant.
There can be a real suspicion that this work around projection is somehow designed to undermine the passion around the threat that they see.
Yeah, nothing could be further from the truth, though. And really, when we own our projections, we're actually owning our own power back. Okay? But the problem is, it comes with a lot of nasty baggage, right? Because we have a lot of false belief systems and a lot of distortions. And when we actually call that back, we have to sort out all that distortion. So it's a lot easier to keep it out there, say that person is awful, that person is evil, that person is bad, and therefore have the right to be righteously indignant, rather than actually calling that back, sorting through all the garbage, and actually end up being an incredibly happy, fulfilled, empowered person in the face of those triggers.
It's great to see you again, my friend.
Nice to see you too, Keith. How are things going for you?
Things are going very well, very busy, and I'm very excited about this show that we're going to get into today. Like, I've been sort of dying to talk to you about all this stuff.
Yeah.
So and just so everyone knows, Kim and I haven't talked about this, so we're really I'm going to follow my curiosity, and I encourage you guys to follow yours, and I think it's going to be a really rich conversation. So let me just say a few words about Kim. And so he really is at the outer edges of human development, not just the theory, but he's actually doing the deep daily work of helping people grow. He's an internationally recognized psychotherapist, teacher, and thought leader who spent decades developing groundbreaking theories of therapy that are both deeply human and highly effective. And his range is staggering. It's like from youth at risk to the elderly to chronic pain to spiritual emergence, trauma, transcendent states of consciousness. He's done a ton of work with marginalized people and has seen the effects of marginalization firsthand. It's really how you started out, I think, Kim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Working with, yeah. He's a co-founder of Stages International with his sister Dr. Terry O'Fallon, and they explore the leading edge of developmental psychology and the evolution of human consciousness. And when it comes to shadow, which is what we're here to talk about, he's really regarded as one of the world's experts. So I am deeply honored and very happy to have you here, Kim, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Keith. That was so sweet.
So maybe we could start off with, at the beginning, as they say. So let's just talk a little bit from your perspective of, we have the three kinds of shadow that I know you've talked about. And maybe you could bring the audience up to speed about that, and obviously with a more of an emphasis on the projection.
Yeah. So people have been exploring shadow, obviously, for hundreds of years, and especially in the West, starting with in the late 1800s. And what I did was I just kind of did this meta model exploration. I just started going, what are all we doing? And that's what I came up with, the three classic forms of shadow: projection, split ego states, and introjects. And either we're absorbing false data, that's an introject, and we need to release that false data, or we have false data and we're putting it onto the world and we need to re-own that and clean that up. Or we're divided, we're indecisive, we have internal conflict, and we need to have those parts integrate together. So that's kind of the quick synopsis. Almost all, as far as I can tell, all shadow work falls in one of those three categories. And all shadow work that's been developed multiculturally and throughout time, from what I can tell, lands in one of those three categories.
Great. So if I was to put that in my sort of everyday language, I would say an introject might be if I'm telling something that isn't true, like, boy, you're really a dummy, you don't know what you're doing, sort of that critical internal voice that might be a little bit abusive.
That's closer to the split ego state with the
okay.
Because you are a dummy. So I have the you are a dummy, but who's the one talking?
Okay.
There's an I talking and saying you are a dummy. So we have two parts inside of us.
So that would be a self that had been split off that would need to be integrated back in.
That's a split. What we have is you are a dummy and I'm the one talking. I'm the one telling you you're a dummy. Now, that could be an introject, the one saying I'm a dummy. It could be an introject. It could be my father kept telling me I was a dummy. Now I just internalize that voice and I'm a dummy. It could be, though, that this is a split ego state or a part that is saying, if you worked harder, you would accomplish your goal. And you're saying that you want to, I mean, if I were to give it in healthier language, right? Because the language needs to be healthier. So you're a dummy versus here you are sitting on the couch eating junk food, and you're saying that you want to lose weight. But instead of using high quality skill language, it's just saying you're a dummy, you stupid shit, or something like that, right?
Right.
So it could be an interject, and maybe the language is an interject, but it might be a legitimate part that's saying, hey, let's work this out together so we can lead a healthier life, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the projection is obviously when I say, like, boy, that guy over there, I hate the way he looks. I hate the way he talks. I hate the way he sounds, right? That sort of stuff. Yeah. Right. And when it's really, and so how would you tell the difference between, if I'm looking at someone, before we get into Trump and all this other stuff, but like, what is one of the hallmarks of recognizing that what I have is like clearly a projection, even if maybe my discernment might be correct. Maybe this person is being a loudmouth, but how do I know that discernment of, boy, he's really being a loudmouth versus that's maybe a projection, or it's a projection and it's an accurate discernment at the same time?
Yeah. Beautiful. I'm glad. I really like the way you're describing it. I call it perception and projection. Am I perceiving something, or am I projecting onto the world and think that I'm perceiving it? And obviously, often both are true a little bit, right? I mean, it's hard to hang a projection on something if there's not some little bit of perception on it. But we can do it. We're pretty skilled in our shadow work to be able to hang a projection even when there's no perception. But a lot of times there's a little bit of perception, and that helps us hang our projection onto it. And then all we see is the projection and not. This is a great question, how to determine. And the answer to that is, are you disturbed by it?
Okay, we're gonna have to really get into that in detail.
It is the degree of the projection. Okay.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just a perception. All there are is events in the world.
Right.
And I can perceive those events. If I'm disturbed by those events, that's a measurement of how much projection is going on.
Okay. So, speaking on behalf of many of my left-leaning beloved friends who are, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging. Some are, upset to the point of being histrionic.
Yes.
Some, I would say, are really disturbed by what they see. But there is a high degree of emotional turmoil on the left, is what I would say. And I can imagine what someone would say to me. They would say, like, don't you dare dismiss what I'm seeing here, when it comes to Hitler or these other people that rose to power, people should have spoken up. Are you seriously telling me that this is my stuff? Blah, 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 blah. I have a right to be upset. I have a right to do this. And there can be a real suspicion that this work around projection is somehow designed to undermine the passion around the threat that they see.
Yeah, nothing could be further from the truth, though. What we're saying is, if we're really taking ownership of our projections, let's start with the gift of projection. The gift that if we work on our projections, what do we get? We get our power back. Notice how much power they're giving away to Trump, how upset they are, how angry are they, how upset, and probably you and I too, right?
Some things for sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm at a place where I don't want to give Trump the power to make me miserable the next 4 years, to be angry, to be anxious, to be depressed and dysfunctional because I'm so distraught over it. Why would I want to give that guy that much power? I don't want to do that, right? So when I actually own my projections, and projections are the hardest thing to own. They're not pretty, right?
Right.
But when I own them and actually work them out, now I have perception. And I'm not in turmoil about it. Doesn't mean I don't see things. I can still see things. And I can actually act more functionally. So if I really want to change something, I'm acting now out of perception, not out of projection. Let's give an example. Look at all the people that are blowing up Tesla dealerships.
Right.
Is that really going to help? That's acting out of our shadow, right? Now, if we acted out of perception and we were clear of our shadow, we probably wouldn't attack Tesla. We might, but we probably wouldn't, especially if we research and realize that Elon Musk, I think, only owns 13% of Tesla at this point. He's way diversified. You're actually harming the very people that are like green minded people who believed in a company and wanted to electrify and want to eliminate. Those are the people you're hurting, right?
Right. Right.
You're not hurting Elon. And
Right.
so this is an example of how when we act out of these passions, just self-justified righteous passion, right?
Right.
We actually cause harm often to the people that are on our side, and we often don't cause harm to the people that we're intending to cause harm to, which we probably don't need to be doing anyway.
Right.
And we actually harm our position in the world to make for other people to make a logical argument, because all the other side has to do is look and say, look at these terrorists bombing Tesla facilities. All he did was change his politics, and they turned on him and became violent,
Right.
right? You don't have the right to your own beliefs. This is proof that the left says you don't have a right to your own beliefs, because all he did was change his beliefs, and now they're blowing up his Tesla factories.
Right. Okay. So that's very well said. So what you're saying in essence would be that if I'm looking at Trump and Musk and the world Doge and all these other things, and I'm feeling this sort of righteous indignation and rage, and it's bleeding into my meetings, it's bleeding into conversations. I've thrown people out of my life. You know, I'm attacking people on social media, all this sort of stuff. What I'm hearing you say is that, in my own words, it'd be something like, that's a very ineffective way to actually get what you want, which is change.
Very ineffective.
Because
It's actually counterproductive. It's actually
it's actually even
not just ineffective, it's counterproductive.
because you're really polarizing. Well, because I think we would say what? Because you, from an outside perspective, unless I'm projecting along with you, I don't particularly trust people that are very clearly projecting massively onto whatever's going on. It's not someone I'm going to follow into something to help create change, because I'm like, well, I see that something has to happen, but I don't agree with whatever's going on with you, which seems like that's your thing that's happening.
Right.
And that's some element that there's some discernment there. Now, if you're listening to this and maybe you say like, all right, Kim, great, thanks, and he makes me crazy. You know, like I read the news and my hair catches on fire. What am I supposed to do?
Okay, this is a great example. You said he makes me crazy. So who's in control?
So the he is.
He is. Why are you giving up your power to him? Why would you do that? And this is where we get into the nuances of the projection, because there's all these belief systems and everything going on. And here I am giving my power away. Why would you give your power away to him? So that's what projection does. Projection sells your power so that you have the right to be righteously indignant.
I love that. Projection sells your power so you have the right to be righteously indignant. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
really, when we own our projections, we're actually owning our own power back. Okay. But the problem is it comes with a lot of nasty baggage, right? Because we have a lot of false belief systems and a lot of distortions. And when we actually call that back, we have to sort out all that distortion. So it's a lot easier to keep it out there, say that person is awful, that person is evil, that person is bad, and therefore have the right to be righteously indignant, rather than actually calling that back, sorting through all the garbage, and actually end up being an incredibly happy, fulfilled, empowered person in the face of those triggers.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And so, I mean, I can see why people are reluctant to sort of move this way, because it is, in essence, if I came to you and was like, boy, this Trump guy, blah, 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 the work that you and I are going to do is you're going to be curious around like, well, tell me what it is that you don't like about him. I presume that's sort of going to be your first question.
Exactly.
And I'm going to say, well, he's arrogant and he's an idiot and he doesn't follow through and he's untrustworthy. And I'm going to have this litany of things, right? And you're probably going to tell me, well, so let's slow down and take them one at a time.
Right. Yeah. And say, let's just look inside now. Do you have a part inside of you that is arrogant and demanding and belittling of you?
Oh, interesting. So this is intense work for a lot of people.
This is really intense work. It's really the hardest shadow work for most people.
And again, the introjects, split off cells, and projections.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not for all people, but I would say on average, it's the hardest work for most people because you have to own the very thing that you're hating out there.
Right. And just for the listeners, I think this is an important thing to note, that if you're really triggered by people who are really triggered in the world, then you're projecting as well.
You're projecting that you're triggered.
You can't get out of like, well, I'm not upset about Trump, but that effing a-hole over there is really upset about him. And thank God I'm not like him.
Yeah. Exactly. Good.
Then you fall right into the thing that we're talking about, right?
Right. Exactly.
As opposed to like, boy, it must be awful to feel that out of control in your life. Because that's what you're really talking about. Right?
Yeah. What we do is we come back to when we actually own our projections, we end up with higher compassion.
That makes sense. I look at Trump and I see it sometimes, when I'm resourced, but I see the little boy whose father was really rough on him, who had a pretty shitty childhood, who's always trying to prove himself, who needs validation constantly. It's like I wouldn't want to live that way, and I wouldn't want anyone I cared about to live that way. It seems like a really not very good way to go through life.
Yeah.
So it opens the door to compassion, which might make this work doubly hard.
Right. Because how do you be compassionate for somebody and at the same time then also say, but I have I need to stand up and make sure that people are safe if that's what my value is. So we come back to what our values are and we understand our values. I want maybe equality, or I want fairness, or I want whatever your values are. Owning your projections doesn't take away your values. It actually helps you stand on them cleaner and clearer.
Yeah.
And more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you think of like maybe 20th century or even 21st century examples of people who have formed some sort of a resistance that from your sort of professional eye seem to be relatively free of projection in the way that they are offering that resistance? Like an MLK sort of is the one that sort of pops to mind.
MLK, Gandhi, Mandela, I forgot.
Nelson Mandela. Yeah.
Nelson Mandela. Yeah. These are all people that really own their own power, and still stood up and made incredible changes because of it. Okay. Another one that I really love is Daryl Davis.
I don't know. He's the guy that worked with the KKK guys.
Yeah, he's a black man who worked with the KKK. And what he did was he befriended the KKK.
Right.
And he'd actually help KKK members get higher and higher in the KKK. That's how much he helped them. And at some point, they just couldn't handle the dissonance anymore of having this black guy who was intelligent, caring, supportive. And they just said, the KKK doesn't represent first of all, they're not telling me the truth about black people, because you're right here in my face, telling me and caring for me, even when I'm supporting a group that wants to harm you and your people. The cognitive dissonance was too much, and they handed in their robes and gave them to him.
Yeah.
He's got a room of KKK robes, even Grand Dragon robes, of people that he converted by being present and real and owning his own power, not living in projections. It doesn't mean there isn't racism. It means that I'm not going to live in it.
Right, and there's an element of what would I say, authentic curiosity from him towards the other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you agree that it's like you're full of hate, but I'm actually genuinely curious about you as a person, which then undercuts their capacity to project onto you, because the projection onto you is you're a black guy, which means you're X and you're Y and you're Z and you're all these things I've been taught.
Just because you're full of hate, I don't have to be.
Right.
And notice how emotions work so often with us. We have this template, if I'm nice to you, you are
nice to you.
If I do a little bit of a joke, you might.
I'll either laugh or try to top you.
Right, yeah. And if I'm angry at you, you will.
Well, F you, Kim. You're not getting away with it in this time.
So we have this reciprocal nature that's not necessarily shadow, but it's part of human interaction.
Yeah.
But when it's running good, it runs good. But when it runs bad, it goes sour really fast. So, love begets love, but hate begets hate. Now the question is, when I project, I give away my power to the other person to define what this reciprocity is going to be.
Yeah.
So if you come at me with irritability, I respond with irritability because I gave away my power to hold my own mood.
Right.
How dare he be irritable with me? He's judging me, blah, 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 blah. And I can't be judged. And blah, 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 blah. So here's back to you, right? It's whatever storyline goes on in the head, right? There's all these often introjected storylines, which we then project out and we sell our power to the storyline.
Interesting. Now, from a developmental point of view, speaking through the stages model, I know that 3.5 orange rational, so they can see cognitive bias, right? So if I'm a solid 3.5 orange scientist, have my PhDs and whatever, and I'm going to say, Kim, we're going to do this experiment. I know that I knew, and we all have cognitive bias, so we're going to set up this double or triple blind experiment to protect us from our projection, essentially, right? Which is essentially, they're essentially acknowledging a projection, right? Or a potential projection.
Onto the concrete world.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit then. So let's talk about projection, maybe more generally around the levels, but what projection looks like from a concrete, subtle, or meta-aware perspective.
Yeah. So on the concrete level, I might say I go to somebody's house and I go, oh God, they have a dirty house. Don't they ever do any upkeep? And then I come to my house and I go, oh my God, look at my house. We can get that at 2.5, 3.0, right?
Right.
3.5
sort of amber or umber kind of a phase, just for people that don't know the stages model. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So maybe it'd be good to just kind of go through the developmental levels really quick. First person perspective, and just kind of using perspective. So I'm not using any bias towards anything. Just a first person perspective is all about me.
Yep.
And I see the world through my eyes. So these are our babies and our toddlers. Mm-hmm. And then at some point we get theory of mind. Oh, you have a mind, Keith, also. And now the whole world of friendship opens up. I never saw friendship before. I only saw what I want. I want the toy. But now in second person perspective, I can see from my point of view, but I can also see from your point of view. Mm-hmm. And therefore, I'm happy to give up the toy or share the toy so that we can have our friendship. So, and this leads to later in second person perspective, where we start developing in-group and out-group. Think about your teenage life and all the cliques that we're forming. This is that in-group, out-group dynamic. And if you look at politics today, this is where we're at. So much of the time, we're still teenagers. Look at the in-group, out-group. If you take a look, for example, of Mitt Romney's public health care and Barack Obama's public health care systems, they're virtually identical. I mean, you can split hairs and make big...
That's right. Mitt Romney, when he was in Massachusetts or wherever, right?
Utah.
But didn't he? I thought he did that in an eastern state. But I know what you mean. He came up with a healthcare plan that was identical to Obamacare, essentially, just on a state level,
But when the Republicans, when the Democrats, they railed against his universal health care. And the Republicans said, yeah, but then when Barack Obama had his, the Democrats were rah, 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 and the Republicans were boo, 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 right? Anger, I mean, they can come up with virtually the same policy.
Right.
But there's so much hatred for that policy on the one side and acceptance on the other side. And so this in-group, out-group thinking is really
like the goths versus the jocks versus the
right. It's
like
versus the Republicans or the liberals versus the conservatives or the right. And when we get sucked into that, there's two things that can be going on. One is that's just my developmental level, so I just see the world through that. But if we actually have moved to the rational and the post-rational into the green and the teal and the turquoise, and now we catch ourselves thinking in-group, out-group, that's a shadow crash. We are triggered by some shadow issue and we've dropped our developmental level all the way down to in-group, out-group, good, bad, right, wrong.
Right. And you can certainly, it certainly appears that some of that is happening on the left, that there is some shadow crashing happening because
Yeah.
I see, I'll try to make this own statement and not pretend
Yeah.
I'm speaking objectively, but I seem to see, large groups institutionally and individually, but forming around some of these sort of shadow crashes, which is, I would say, understandable because they feel rightly or wrongly that they are most definitively under attack.
Yes, which is exactly what the right has been feeling. So now we go from the in-group, out-group fighting to kind of where different religions like Jesus did the Good Samaritan. No, it's not about your in-group, it's your out-group. It's about what kind of a human being are you? And if you take a look at the human being that you are, and that's what the parable of the Good Samaritan was all about. It's like, no, just because you're in your in group doesn't mean you're good. And just because they're in the out group doesn't mean they're bad. And he really addressed that very clearly in the parable of the Good Samaritan. For those that don't know, the Samaritans were considered the most evil people. And so Jesus told the parable about an in-group person who was sick alongside the road, and many of the in-group people walked by and just passed him up. But somebody in the out-group, the evil, bad Samaritan, in this case, if you're a liberal, the evil Republicans, walked by. The Democrats passed up the homeless person, didn't care. The Republicans stopped, picked him up, took him home, took care of him. And so Jesus was talking about, we got to get out of this in-group, out-group thinking. We got to move into, what kind of a character are we? What kind of a person are we? That gets us into early third person perspective. And then we get to the rational. I can think about my thinking and I can set up dynamics so that my thinking is actually accurate. And then we get to green, fourth person perspective, where we have cultural relativity. We respect the different cultures. Every culture has a congruence of some kind within their culture. Right? So now instead of seeing, hunting and gatherers as some limited, stupid, primitive people,
Barbarian.
barbarians, we see them as dignified human beings with have a rich, diverse cultural dynamic in their own, one of which we can learn from.
And that's true. So that's true at 4.0. It's not true with the rationalist, because at the rationalist phase, I don't see that I'm projecting, in essence, the so-called superiority of my rational viewpoint onto the world. So I might be the anthropologist that goes around the world and says, look at these poor savages that lack
Right.
the capacity for rational thinking. Let's bring it to them and help enlighten them.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
But at 4.0, you gain the capacity to say, they seem like they're doing pretty well on their own, and they make meaning in a way that's different from mine.
Right.
And maybe with the ethical, the value here is we should stand back and let people have their own way of making meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's just hold them with love and let's even learn from them, right? Yeah. Cultural relativism, right? So this is important because look at how little cultural relativism we have between Republicans and Democrats.
Right.
When do we actually go to Republicans, go, help me understand your culture?
Right.
Right? And if you're doing that, good. You haven't crashed to 2.0. But if you're going, oh, those Republicans, blah, 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 they're stupid, or what poor stupid people because they bought into Trump and they were just suckered, right?
Yeah.
What a demeaning way to look at 50% of the population, right?
It's a little condescending, right? For sure.
A little.
At a minimum, yeah.
And how do you think they feel when they're talked to that way?
Totally. I mean, I joke with some of my liberal friends. I said, because I travel a lot on my motorcycle and sit at a lot of bars and stuff.
Yeah.
And you talk to a lot of MAGA Republicans, and what I tell my liberal friends is they really care.
Yeah.
Like they really love their family, they really love their country, they love their God, and and they're actually quite pleasant to have a drink with if you're willing to just listen.
That's right. Exactly. They are. I live in a red state. I've been liberal my whole life, but I was raised in a red state, so I'm around, And this is something, Keith, that is so important for us to learn, I think, because we have these caricatures of the Republican and the Democrat. And so when I listen to the Democrats talk about the caricature of the Republican, I've never met that Republican in real life. Living in a red state, I've never met one person that meets that caricature. And the same, when I hear the caricature of the Republicans on the Democrats, I've never met that person either. I've
Yeah,
never
it's like
met.
we're all attending drag queen shows
Exactly.
every Tuesday.
Right. Yeah. So what's happening here is this is all projection. We're projecting what a Republican is on the entire Republican Party. And the Republicans are projecting what a Democrat is on the entire Democratic Party. And neither are seeing the truth at all. It's
Right.
absolutely just not. I mean, maybe you can find that caricature somewhere, right? But it would not be the
Sure.
full
Of course, it's
population.
right. Yeah.
It'd be extremely rare, small population. And our media fosters our projections.
Right.
You can watch, left-leaning media that
Yeah.
interviews all the stupid Trump Republicans, and they cherry pick the stupidest ones. They say, look how stupid these people are. But if you go to right-leaning media, they're doing the same thing. They're interviewing liberals, and they're going, God, look how stupid these. They're cherry picking the stupidest comments from the liberals, and so it just fosters this in-group, out-group, teenage worldview of just how stupid the other people are and how amazing we are.
Right. Now, I want to ask one more question about this sort of concrete versus subtle projection, and then move to ask you about the view from the Republicans in the last, say, five years or so. So, developmentally speaking, what if I'm rational or below? I can only project onto concrete things. That would be your home, your clothing, the way you look, things that are concrete, the five senses.
No, I can see my projections. I can project on anything, but I can only
Correct.
I
Yes.
tend to only see my projections on concrete things.
Which would mean like, oh, Kim, you're black and I'm white, and I can see that I'm projecting a whole thing onto the color of your skin because I can see that with my eyes, and I can look at what that means in my interior experience. That's still a concrete projection because it's about the color of your skin.
Yes.
Okay, and so speaking very generally, we would say the Republicans are sort of caught maybe more in that projection of the concrete.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay.
No, not necessarily any more than we are.
Okay, and then what does it then mean to project from the next developmental stage up? The subtle.
Yeah. So we go into late fourth person perspective. I think what people call teal.
Okay.
And now what we're doing is we're seeing how we perceive another person's insides. Trump is a narcissist. Trump is got all these evil plans to dominate the world and really harm everybody. That's a projection of an internal world, and that's our internal world. Okay? And this is a hard thing to own, okay? And so if I just let my mind go and go, okay, Trump's a narcissist who doesn't care about anybody else but himself, and he's just destroying everybody's lives. I go, wow, how is that true inside of me? And what I find inside my mind is I have a dictator mind inside of me. The dictator that says, okay, all these other parts, you be quiet, I'll support you, you don't do this. Boy, I have a dictator mind. He's starting to squirm, huh?
We're talking about Kim.
And I want to run my internal world the way it should be run because I've got plans for it. And all the other little parts are going, you're hurting me, stop.
Yes.
So that's an example of how we project the dictator out onto the world. And I'm not saying the perception isn't there, but the projection is there, and that's where all the disturbance comes from. Because all of this disturbance of our internal world is getting stirred up because we're really tired of our own dictator mind.
Right.
Our own self-righteous dictator that says this is the way it's supposed to be in here.
And so people really, in some ways, have to take a little bit of a leap of faith in situations like this and say that they have to presume that if they own the projection, it won't automatically negate the care and the drive to be an effective agent of change in the world.
Yeah, and not only will it not negate it, it'll make you more effective.
So the leap of faith there is really like, okay, if I do this work and I want to work against what Trump stands for, I'll be much more effective at it. I'll galvanize people better. I'll lead better. I'll think more clearly. I'll see things more accurately.
Right.
And I'll be more at peace.
Right. Absolutely. But all of those, all at the same
time.
Isn't
a bad thing.
No. It's a bad thing.
And people will say something like, Keith, how can you not be upset? Right. And I said, well, I'm concerned about what I see in the world, but, I have my sphere of influence here, my friends and my community and places, people that I love and places where I try to have conversations like this. But what do you want me to do? What is the point of getting mad? It's like to me, it's like getting mad at the rain. It's like you can be mad at the rain, but it's still going to rain.
Right,
If you're mad
exactly.
about it.
Yeah.
You can move, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And some people do move to get away from Trump.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it sounds like you're saying, really, this is a practice of radical acceptance.
This is a practice of radical.
But from a Zen perspective, that's what we would say. Reality is as it is, and it can be no other way.
That's right.
And so do you choose to accept what is, since it is, and take a step forward? Or do you resist what is and suffer
Right.
and fight what is?
Right. Exactly. So that comes coming at it from the state perspective.
Yeah.
Through development and through state work, we can get to there too. We can also get to it through shadow work. And so this is where shadow and development and state work all start having these interfaces that work together. And if you find they can't hold the state or the developmental level, it's because of shadow. That's why we have a higher developmental level, and now all of a sudden we're crashed into in-group, out-group thinking. We can hold a state when we're meditating, but then we walk through the world, we read a post, or we see Trump on the news, and we're out of the state now. That's because of shadow issues.
Right. And it's the same work of, working with a group of professionals, someone that can help the shadow be seen, which, since it's in shadow, understood, and then ultimately metabolized in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then you'd be more effective. So for taking Daryl Davis, for example, look at how many people that were hardcore, KKK people, that he actually changed.
Right.
And look at the millions, and this is not a condemnation of Black Lives Matter, all support for them. But how many minds do you think they really changed? They rallied a lot of people, but how many minds did they change? I would argue none.
Because it was very much an us versus them mentality. It was this
It was.
2.0. It was this in-group, out-group.
Yes.
Not yet at a point of being able to recognize sort of universality. Hey, we believe that all lives matter.
Right.
We want to put an emphasis on Black Lives Matter because we feel like they've been negated. So we actually want to hold a larger perspective.
Yeah.
Because what do you have? You have Black Lives Matter, then what's the response? Well, Blue Lives Matter.
Right.
All lives matter. So there's an immediate oppositional.
Needed oppositional, because it went from Black Lives Matter to Blue Lives Matter, and then to All Lives Matter. And they were the Republicans were saying All Lives Matter. And then the left came back and said no lives matter unless Black Lives Matter, and it's just right. It's just this constant tit for tat, in group, out group fighting.
Yeah.
And so when we actually bridge that gap of that teenage worldview, that in group, out group fighting, we actually hold fourth person perspective or later while we're interacting with people, then we can actually have change. And Daryl Davis is a living example of that. I can give you an example too. When I was, I live in a red state, and I was, but we all interact because we're at the soccer games. Our kids are in the soccer games, right?
Sure.
So we're actually living with each other. So we see that the evil that the other side has isn't there, right? So I had one guy who was in his, Republican mode, railing on how evil socialism is, right? And he was just letting loose, and I go, yeah, I know. Socialism has a lot of problems. And every time it's been tried, it's been, there's just been disaster after disaster. So I'm joining his world, right?
Yeah.
And then I just say, but you know what? It sure is nice to be able to drive to Missoula without having to pay tolls. And he looked at me. Or actually, I think I said, but I sure like our socialized road system. And he goes, what?
Oh,
isn't it nice to be able to just drive to Missoula without having to pay tolls all the way along the way? Well, and he looked at me, what do you mean? I said, well, that's with capitalism, right? Every farmer has the right to toll you to go through his property or her property. So I sure like that socialized road system. Boy, I'm glad I don't have to stop for tolls. He goes, me too. And I said, can you imagine the military? We have a socialized military. Do you like our military? Yeah, it's a socialized military. Can you imagine if China and Russia and India all got together and bought our military and then used it against us? That's what a capitalistic military would be.
Yeah, mercenaries essentially.
Mercenaries, exactly.
Yeah.
Aren't we glad we have a socialized military so we don't have to worry about that? Yeah. Now, was that effective or not? Who knows? I do know actually, because the next week I was at another soccer game and I heard this guy was sitting there and another guy was railing on him about the evils of socialism. I was just within earshot. I wasn't right present, right? And this guy, yeah, I know, I don't like socialism either, but it sure is nice to have these roads.
Yeah.
So we can bring humanity into our conversations with people. That's what bridges that gap. And
But we have to be
values
curious.
in capitalism, and they can find the values in socialism, and we can actually both find rich rewards in the culture that the other person is presenting.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. Like, I have certainly learned, I was virulently sort of anti-gun for most of my life, but now having lived out west for so long and having met so many genuinely responsible, intelligent, nuanced, strong advocate for gun rights and things, it's like I've completely changed my tune on that, where I really see the complexity.
Yeah.
It used to be like, oh, these rednecks, they want their guns,
Yeah.
and now it's like, oh, it's much more complex for me, and I see how much care and concern
Yeah.
and dignity there is on the side of many of the people that I talk to, and I'm curious about. Well, you tell me why you're like, why do you have so many guns? And they give me sometimes really beautiful, elaborate answers. Not so much that I feel like
Shockingly complex and nuanced, huh?
Yeah, but not so much that like I'm like, oh, I'm going to go stockpile too. But it's like okay, I can actually I understand your reasoning in a way that makes me kind of want to defend your right to,
Yeah.
So that's all really well said, Kip. So when we get back to, because we're obviously, most people listening and most people on these calls are sort of, they're either left or they're sort of left and they've ended up sort of back at the center somehow because of the weird politics of the last, say, decade. But if we take a more sympathetic view towards the Republican viewpoint over the last, say, let's say under Biden and a little bit before, you were going to say something about the projection onto the left there, and I just want to give some space for that.
Okay, the right's projection onto the left, which also has perception, is it's a war on traditional values, and it's also a war on whites and on males. And so, for example, the perception is, there's obviously plenty to perception for anybody who isn't aware of that. The storylines about if you're white and you're male, then you are by definition sexist and racist. There's no other alternative. You are.
And some of us have encountered that firsthand, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But, that's like going back to original sin, right? It's
sure.
amazing how this creeps back in, no matter how advanced we think we are. Here we are back to original sin. Adam and Eve sinned, and everybody else sins because of it.
Right.
Right. And of course, there's been pushback on that, but it doesn't take long to be on Facebook to see that there's still that strong belief system among a large population of the left that if you're white and you're male, then you're racist and you're sexist, and that's just how it is. And you deserve all the horror and sadness. So you bring up, white male suicide rates that are just skyrocketing, for example. Right. And they go, well, they deserve it, for after all they did. But this is a confusion of historical population studies opposed to an individual, right? Historically, there was slavery. People owned slaves in America, but none of the white males own slaves that are alive today, right?
Of course, right.
They didn't do that, and there was white male privilege, but the young kids of today didn't get that much. We've got educational parity, more than educational parity, for example, with females, for example.
Oh, the females are way above. It's actually something like 60% of women, college graduates are women, and 40% are men now. It's It was the opposite of that in the early 70s when part of the women's movement was
When
founded.
I
There
grew
was
up, that was me in the women's movement, and
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
fighting for the right for women. You know, I as a high schooler, I sat in and said women don't have to wear dresses; they can wear pants. And we sat in and we occupied the high school, and they changed the policy so women could wear jeans if they wanted to. Right? That simple things like that. And then in college, I was fighting for taking money back out of South Africa because of apartheid, and we won that war. You know, and then we fought for females to be able to both for equal opportunity, right? And so we fought to have these things happen that you have to have quotas, right? Basically, kind of the early version of DEI, right?
Yeah, or like affirmative action, you would say, which was sort of
affirmative
in
action.
the 80s, right? Yeah, which I certainly grew up with.
Now, I was in college and I lived in a household with 5 women, and they were graduating, and I had one woman who was graduated in the forestry service, and she got a promotion. She came home, I got a promotion. I was celebrating with her that she got the promotion. She says, Kim, I need to talk to you. She said, I don't deserve this promotion. I got promoted over a man that has been there for like 20 years, that knows this place inside out. He has devoted his life to this forestry division, and I don't even know how to be his employer. So now he is teaching me how to be his boss. He's actually doing 3 jobs. He's doing his job, he's doing my job, and he's teaching me how to do his job. And it is not fair to him. This is the sobering reality of affirmative action, how it actually harms people. And that's not that I don't agree with affirmative action. We said, okay, yeah, this is a horror story, actually, on an individual level. We know we need to do it for culture. We know we need to do it to change society. But we are harming individuals in the process that don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Individuals that actually support the movement
Yeah.
of DEI, but we're harming them through it. So and so it's a real sobering thing to realize that you're promoting something that you think is all good, and you're realizing, oh, back to the yin yang. Everything that we promote that's good, it's got some darkness in it. And everything that we see as dark has some goodness in it.
Right, right. And to me, there's always some room for, and I feel like in the 80s, the conversations, at least as I remember them, were a little more nuanced in the sense of there was an acknowledgement of affirmative action will essentially have short-term racist repercussions. We are going to put certain people in over certain other people because we're trying to get everybody to the same starting line. Right. That was the sort of idea back then.
Yeah.
And with the DEI, the idea went from an equal starting line to the equal outcome idea, which is much, much different, which is that, well, we have to have 50% women as coders, no matter what.
Right.
And it's like, there are lots of people, including myself, that have pointed out, about 20% of coding graduates are women, and about 20% of coders in jobs are women. And for 25 years, they've been trying to change that, and it hasn't changed. Is it possible that it's not about sexism? And just asking that question got the president of Harvard fired back in 2005 or 6. Just asking that, hey, maybe there's another data set that we should be looking at here.
Right.
So getting back to this idea of the right and some of their charge with the left, which is a charge that part of me shares, which it can feel, how shall we say, the discernment could be, it sort of looks unfair to a lot of people. And the projection—
It's unfair on an individual level, even though we're trying to get
unfair.
fairness on the cultural level.
Yes. And then the projection is you'd have to help me with the projection, but it's more about, they're stealing my rights. They're socialists. They want to ruin this country. They're trying to take my religion, my gun's my religion, my whatever the story is, right? But there's a sense of disdain for their values.
Hey, and we can bring it down to the personal level even, Keith. I mean, that's kind of the big brush, right? But talk to mothers of white sons.
Yeah.
They're going, why would I want to raise my son in a liberal viewpoint where white males are evil people? Why would I want them to do that? No, so it's not just when you attack white males or males or whites, you're not just attacking them, you're attacking all the people who love them.
Right.
right?
Right.
Their fathers, their mothers, their children, their granddaughters, their sisters, their brothers, right? And sometimes we don't see the impact of how powerful that is for people.
Right. Right. And again, it's that lack of empathy, that lack of
Hmm.
curiosity.
Right. So
And
this is where I want to bring in the next really important nuance here, Keith.
right.
So when we go into 4.0 and we actually do have cultural compassion and relativity, we
So moving from
understand.
orange to green, just so everyone has
Yeah,
the map. Yep.
thank you. Green, the move to green and teal. And we have that ability for cultural relativity. How do we raise our children? We raise our children differently when we're at 4.0 or 5.0 or 4.5, whatever, in green and teal and turquoise. We raise our
Yeah.
children differently. We teach them cultural relativity. But what we don't see, what we're learning, I think what we're learning, this is what I'm seeing, is that those children grow up and then they turn it into a 2.5 religion.
Yeah, of course, because they have
2.5
to.
creates religions, right?
Yeah.
And now you have all the words of cultural relativity, but with the in-group, out-group, hateful dynamic,
The fundamentalist energy.
fundamentalism, right? So we have all these people coming up and they're influencers and they're doing interviews and they're on the TV and they're on TikTok and they're everywhere. And they're really promoting all the values that we would say we like, but they're doing it from a fundamentalist crusade kind of orientation, which actually undermines the very values of green,
Right.
teal.
Right. It's the Greta Thunberg's. I think that's her
Right,
last name.
exactly.
But she spoke very well to people who shared her viewpoint. And
Right.
to your point from earlier, she converted not a single person who didn't already agree with her. Because
Yeah.
she came across, I mean, she was 15 or whatever, right? But she
Right.
came across like a big scold, like
Right.
she could have
Shame,
shame
blame,
on you,
guilt, which is classic the second person perspective,
Right.
2.5.
Right.
That's where all our shame, guilt, blame,
Right.
all of that stuff.
Totally.
Right.
I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I was like, just when I heard her, I was like, oh my God, she's like really shamey.
So, celebrating Greta, love her dearly.
Right, and she's going to
2.5,
grow into
right?
something interesting, right?
And she's growing up. I think she's probably 3.0 or something. But anyway, but that's what's happening. And so what happens is, let's talk about those of us who are maybe green or teal. When we hear people speaking the same language, it's easy to be sucked into that language.
Yes.
But
yes.
now they have the attitude of 2.5 of
Yes.
a fundamentalist, and now we get sucked into the fundamentalist worldview too.
Yes.
And
And we
now,
don't necessarily recognize that we're colluding over the content
right,
with the wrong structure.
with a wrong process, content
Right.
versus process. And this is where we end up with so this is why in my work I talk about content shadow and process shadow.
Okay.
Because we might have the content fine, but our process is operating at early developmental.
So, in other words, you might identify, boy, Keith has really healthy, egalitarian sort of values that he's espousing, and he's holding them in this absolutistic, abusive way when he goes out into the world.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So we need to, and I don't know if anybody else is talking about this, but this is what I'm just seeing in terms of looking at shadow. Sometimes our content is shadow, but sometimes it's our process is shadow, even though the content seems pretty nice. And so this is a really important piece for us to look at when we look at our shadow crashes. This is how development helps us understand our shadow. What way am I processing this information? And if I'm processing it through, hey, cultural relativity, I'm curious about Trumpers, I want to understand where they're coming from. Why is this such a passionate movement for them? Good, you're agreeing. If you're processing in it, they are stupid, dumb, they're voting against their own self-interest, Trump really tricked them, then we're coming from 2.5. We're coming from fundamentalism.
Right.
And that's
And
a
then
measure. That helps us measure how far we have shadow crashed.
Right. Right. And the work you would advocate, again, for people listening would be to be curious about which part of that phenomena. If they wanted to sort of if they want to look at their own actions in the last couple of days, the next few days, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you get to decide, do I want to give away the power of my development
Yeah.
to this other outside influence? Do I want to stop living from from green, teal, turquoise just
Right.
because of this, right?
Right.
So it doesn't, so this is where we start getting clear. Oh, wait, no, I can actually be more effective from green, teal, and turquoise than I can from, what did you call it? Blue, amber? What is it?
Blue, well, there's like amber. Umber would be like the 3.0 stage. The sort
Yeah.
of in
So just
between.
before that, even
Yeah, yeah,
2.5. Yeah. So, and I think when you think of it that way, it becomes obvious. Obviously, I'm going to be more effective if I come from.
well, of course, right? I mean, it's what you're talking about at the game, being at the softball game. What I'm talking about sitting at the bar, where it's like, you have a chance, as always, you have a chance to connect with people sort of human to human.
Yeah.
And I've never had that happen. Even if they appear to be someone, or even if they hold beliefs that at first I'm like, wow, that's like this guy's really racist or really sexist. But if I can stay open and stay curious, then there's always an in. There's always an in, and to your point, there's always an opportunity, maybe just to plant a little seed
right.
of like, have you thought about those free highways?
Curiosity. Yeah.
I said to my dad all the time, he would be like, "Oh, the right, the Democrats," I'd say, "Well, I sure wish I had free healthcare like you have free healthcare. I would love to be able to go to the doctor and pay $5. I'm in the capitalist system myself,
Right,
Terrible. And he would really be like, I'd be like, yeah, I can't afford to go to the doctor. He'd be like, you can? I would say, no, I can't afford to go to the doctor. Like, I don't have socialized medicine like you. And I used to love saying, I was a little bit of tweaking him, but he would also get it, and we could connect and laugh a little bit.
Yeah, and so on the term of socialized medicine, this is another interesting phenomenon where we can really look at our shadow, because what we're saying is we keep fighting for socialized medicine, the Affordable Health Care Act. But what good is socialized medicine if the healthcare itself is a sick system?
Right.
All we're doing is we're taking tax money and we're paying pharmaceuticals bunches of tax money to keep us sick rather than to make us healthy.
Right.
So how good is that really? And we know that they're doing this, just like there's people out there that are giving you courses on how to buy up trailer parks and squeeze so much money out of the people that they can't afford to leave, but they don't default. And how to just squeeze them to the absolute maximum amount. You can take a course on how to do this to people.
Right.
Right? And the pharmaceuticals are doing the same thing. It's like, how can we give them medicine that will cure their initial symptom that they came in with, but will give enough side effects that they'll have to take another medicine?
Right.
And then that'll kind of help that symptom, but then it'll create other symptoms. And now they'll have to take another medicine. How many people are on 5, 10, 15 different medicines?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. And
especially where you live. I mean, I'm in Boulder, where it's like, you walk around and you go, I need to go to the gym again today.
Right.
Exactly. Isn't enough?
Yeah. And what happens when people talk about the sick care system rather than the healthcare system? Tulsi Gabbard gets ejected, Marianne Williamson gets sidelined. Right. They fly to the Republican Party where they can be heard. Right. And then we just say, oh, they're evil traitors. Well, if you're not listening to the message of we have a sick care system rather than a healthcare system, we have to address that. They're going to go where they might get heard.
Yeah.
JFK is another example. And people are saying, oh, he's so anti-vaccine. No, he's saying vaccines can cause harm. And they do. And this comes back to the population versus an individual. On a population, they're a godsend. For individuals, certain individuals, they can be devastating. And we know that. That is research.
Agreed.
And he's saying, he's not saying, I'm taking away your vaccines. He's saying, I want to research them for health. Maybe we can make them better. But what do we hear on the left? We hear that he's going to take away our vaccines.
Right.
Right.
And it's the same point. So I just want to highlight to the listeners, you're really making the same point here, which is the collective versus the individual.
Right.
And that if we on the left can acknowledge that vaccines are great and they do incredible good for the group, and we just want to acknowledge that there can be individual harm. It's not zero. Right. And certainly that was an issue with COVID and the COVID vaccines. It was not a not zero.
Right.
And you're saying the same thing when it comes to things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hey, okay, we agree that the world should be a fairer place, and we just want to have the individual costs to be acknowledged, because maybe we'll say like, sure, tell me what the goal is. Tell me how you know when you've won. How you've arrived there, and acknowledge that some people are going to have to, the individuals may have to pay a little bit of a cost here, and you might get more people that would be willing to back you because you're being honest.
If we can have some empathy for the people that are going to suffer for this,
or set up things
that don't deserve it,
right?
Instead of saying they deserve it,
Right, right.
right?
Or acknowledge that it's kind of not fair. Like, hey, what happened to black people in the 20th century and the redlining and being excluded from the GI Act and, all these other things, moving highways through their neighborhoods, not fair.
Not fair enough.
And we don't want to do the two wrongs to make a right. We don't want to sideline a bunch of people that are in line for promotions and careers. In order to address that, we have to find a way to deal with this in a way that can honor the complexity.
So when we look at the nuances, I think we can come with a lot more compassion. If we hold compassion for both perspectives, which we can if we're at green, teal, or turquoise, then we're not going to be doing that other divisive stuff going on. We're going to listen with a heart of love and compassion and go, yes, we want to help people of color. We want to help women. We also want to help whites and males and everybody else. We want to figure out how to do this with as much compassion and love as everybody. And we're all on the same goal. We want basically equality for all. And the Republicans would say that too. We want equality for all. We just want to do it in a different way.
Right. And they would have the emphasis more on the individual, I would say, generally speaking.
That's why they're saying it's merit-based.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is help. If anybody's not doing it on merit-based, then we need to help them so that they can have more merit. But we shouldn't give them a job when they don't have merit.
Right.
That's what they're saying.
Right.
Okay. Right. And that's a reasonable argument too.
It's a very reasonable argument. I mean, I certainly would be irritated if that someone, Integral Life gave this podcast to someone and threw me out just because of the way they looked, right? That would be like, well, that doesn't feel fair. Right. But if they're better than me, it's like, all right, I guess they're better than me and they don't look like me. All right, whatever. Yeah. I'll go polish my game. Well, so speaking of Corey has a great question here, which I want to just read to you here, Kim. He says, one of the big challenges here is it's very difficult to discern where our individual personal shadows end and our surrounding collective shadows begin. We think we're looking at a collective shadow, but we are actually looking at our own projections. Or we think we're looking at our own personal shadows, and they're actually the introjections from our surrounding culture or subculture. Does Kim have any suggestions to help us tell one from the other?
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful question, Corey. So one of the things we talk about is cultural shadow, how we raised in a culture and we just absorb the cultural shadow of that culture. And so the first thing to always look at is, what are my symptoms? Am I disturbed, right? Now, are my disturbances matching the same disturbances as my side, right? Okay, now I'm probably absorbing cultural shadow, right? Now, I think Corey was also referring to what happens when I'm looking at the other side, right? How do I know whether I'm dealing with my own personal shadow or whether I'm looking at their cultural shadow? And the same thing applies. Am I disturbed by it? That's mine. Or it's mine either way. I'm disturbed. Either I'm disturbed in the same way that all of my group are, or I'm disturbed in a different way than my group are.
Right.
It's still my shadow. I'm disturbed by the other side in the same way that my shadow is, or in a different way than my in-group is. But either way, it's still our shadow. And so this comes back to, it's still my shadow if I'm disturbed. Now the question is, how, it's hanging on some perceptions, of course, probably. So I might be perceiving some things. But if you're not in there, in the other culture, talking to them respectfully, with love and care and compassion, you don't know. Well, you can pretty much guarantee it's a projection because you're not in there talking with them, right?
Right.
So it doesn't mean you're not having perception, but the point is the disturbance still comes from the projection. Now, I want to separate that out from the people that have actually lost their jobs and they're anxious about not having money, right?
So here we're talking like maybe a federal worker that's lost their job, or they're under the guillotine sort of over their head.
Right. Yeah. No, having that kind of anxiety is understandable. That's not necessarily shadow. There's some anxiety that I'm not going to have a job, that I'm not going to have money, things like that. But
or
that
maybe too the discernment that it's not fair. Like I'm getting fired as part of a political gestalt here that actually is not. This is not like it's a rational process that's being gone through.
Or it might be. I don't know.
Or it might be, but the point is, I'm saying they probably feel that it feels very arbitrary.
Oh yeah, it would be really hard. Now that doesn't necessarily mean we have to see them as evil people. We can see them as we're trying to streamline government, whatever the storyline is. maybe they are trying to destroy the government. Maybe they're trying to streamline. Who knows? None of us really know what's inside their heads. We can project upon it, and that's our projection. But I want to separate out symptoms that are obviously projection based, that are talking about what the other person is, versus symptoms of I'm worried about my next paycheck.
Right.
That's different than shadow.
And that's because I'm disturbed, but it's a disturb that has a very kind of literal, obvious, concrete thing.
And I'm not saying anything about anybody else.
Right. Or it could be I'm concerned because there's been talk of doing X, Y, and Z to the healthcare system, and I'm worried for myself or I'm worried for my child, which is very different.
Yeah, it's kind of an unknown. And now we have to deal with how am I with the unknown? Now, there could be some shadow elements with that. For example, I have a young man that is really dear to me who got the notice that he was going to be let go, and he took the payout. He said, this is a great opportunity for me. I get paid for 9 months. I get to go explore the world. I get to enjoy my life. I get to really do some internal work and do all my healing and stuff. And I get paid for it. It's a pretty damn good deal. I like it. Right?
Yeah.
And plus the employer is saying, and when this all blows over, he's going to hire me back anyway. So,
Right. Right.
So just noticing the orientation that we have towards, is this an opportunity or is this a curse? And sometimes, curses have these nuggets of real treasure inside of them, and sometimes maybe not. I don't know. But I'm coming with a lot of compassion, empathy for the people, especially those who have families that are losing their job. Right? But also saying, but maybe there's another way to look at it so you don't suffer quite as much as you are suffering,
Right.
without saying you're doing anything wrong or making you bad or anything like that.
Right. Okay. So, and just for the audience here, we're sort of moving into the question and answer. So feel free to chat questions in or to call in if you would like. We have another one here from James, and he said many people have trauma responses to Trump's actions and controversies, like immigrants responding in fear of ICE raids. Reactions to trauma are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Can you talk a little about how we work with trauma reactions and how those interact with our own shadows?
Yeah, trauma and shadow are the same thing. It's just shadow is a larger category. Trauma is a specific kind of shadow dynamic. Okay, so for example, working with people that have been traumatized, I did a lot of work with, say, for example, sexual abuse, children that were sexually abused repeatedly. And when they came in, I started discovering, well, first of all, I got tired of the traditional psychotherapeutic model that takes forever to heal. So I tried to develop more efficient methods and finally stumbled upon them by listening deeply to my clients instead of just the psychotherapy storylines, right? Because I had ingested them, and some of them are actually shadow storylines. They're inaccurate. People can heal very fast in some cases. In some cases, it takes longer. But the point is, the storyline that you can't heal fast is absolutely false. I know.
Right. And a real disservice to someone who might, even if it's 1 in a million, it's a disservice to the 1 in a million, right?
It really is. And what happens is we end up, and I do work with psychotherapists or teaching people how to do this stuff. And I show you how you're slowing your client down. They're actually ahead of you. But because of your belief system, you're slowing them down. Look where they're going and look how you keep dragging them backwards just by thinking this way, right? So anyway, that's a storyline there. So anyway, working with them, it's like, okay, what they're actually doing is what they're doing is when you're abused, often what happens, not all the time, often what happens is you absorb the darkness of the abuser and you give away your power, because that's the only way you survive. I lost power. They controlled me and they abused me. And so now that becomes ensconced in my consciousness, and now my automatic response is to give away my power. Right. I project my power onto the abuser and I absorb their darkness. And what we need to do is have them release the darkness back to the abuser and take back their power. Now, a lot of times we do the one part, but we don't have them take back their power, and that keeps them from being empowered. And when we
Right.
do that, they feel empowered, they feel alive, they feel vivacious, they get their own autonomy back, they initiate, they follow through,
Right.
they start living a rich, beautiful life. And that's what the power of owning back our projection.
Right, right. Okay, so let me pause because there's a bunch of questions coming in that are that's specific around like, what about this, what about that when it comes to Trump. Here's the meta, I think, for everybody. You're saying it's possible for us to reclaim this projection and we know it, regardless of what's happening. So Trump did something yesterday. He's going to do something tomorrow. It's
Right.
going to
We
be in the
know
news.
that.
It's coming.
That's
It's
right.
happening and it's going to happen, everybody. We know it.
Right.
So, Kim, in a nutshell, tell people what they can do the next time they go, God damn that guy, or whatever their reaction is, right? What's the like, ask yourself this question.
Okay. So ask yourself this question. How am I doing the same thing that Trump is doing to my internal world right now?
I hate that
Okay.
question. That's a good question.
Right? How am I doing it to my internal world right now? I might also be doing it to others, by the way.
Sure.
Right? But how am I doing it to my own
Like those
internal world?
Republicans.
Right, like those Republicans. Yeah, exactly. But how am I actually being kind of a dictator to different parts of myself that are screaming to be heard
Yeah.
and you're just ignoring them? Right? What happens if we sit back and we say, dictator mind, let's just calm down. Oh no, I need to control it. No, 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 no. Let's just hear all the voices. Let's just let them have their voice. You shouldn't be saying that. You shouldn't be thinking that. You shouldn't be feeling that. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's just
You
notice.
have to, or you have to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves.
That's
You
right.
need to be
You
doing
need
this.
to stand up for those that can't stand up for themselves on your internal world. That's right.
Right. So everything you bring back to yourself.
Right. And notice how we're play acting out what's happening in our internal world on the external world. The internal world and the external world mirror each other. The way we view the external world is just about a direct mirror of what's happening on the internal world.
I mean, it's intense. I mean, I can just do it because Trump isn't super triggering to me, but just that thought experiment is like, I mean, I can just feel the
Yeah.
vulnerability and the
Yeah.
just the intensity of that level of inward gazing. It's very
Right.
intense, right? I mean, like it
Very.
really kind of breaks the external projection apart in a way that's not entirely comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. Really comfortable. If it was comfortable, we'd have done it already.
Yeah.
So when you do this, what I guarantee you is that if you do this, when you do this, the external triggers will fall away. Because right now, what we have is events in the world. We are triggered by those events. What do we do when we're trigger aware? We try to destroy the trigger. We demonize the trigger. We try to push the trigger away. We hide from the trigger. I'm going to leave America. I'm going to bury myself. I'm not going to pay any attention to media. Or I'm going to attack and fight it and destroy it.
Right.
That's trigger aware. That's part of the healing process. We go from unaware to symptom aware. I'm having all these symptoms. I'm disturbed. And now I'm aware of what's triggering them. It's that goddamn Trump. Right? But that doesn't get us to our internal process aware.
Right.
The internal process aware means, oh, how is this a mirror of my internal world? Wow. No wonder I'm so pissed off at Trump. I've been doing Trumpism to myself
Right.
for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right. It's incredible. I mean, it sort of makes me think of Candide, and at the end, the advice. Oh my God, I can't think of Voltaire, the brilliant Voltaire, in the middle of all that was going on in his world at the time. The advice is the lesson that he learns, the narrator learns, is tend to your own garden.
Yeah, tend to your own garden.
And I've held that for decades because it's like at the end of the day, I know that when I tend to my own garden, either literally or metaphorically, I'm in a much better place. Because that's really the only place it's the only thing that I can actually tend to.
Right.
Right.
And then when I tend to it, I can actually tend to the external world in a much more skilled way.
Right. So let me see. We have a few other questions here, and then we'll sort of wrap this down. So someone said, how does Donald Trump embody aspects of the collective shadow? And what does this reveal about societal values and unconscious biases? So I presume this would be more towards the right.
Okay. Okay. what Donald Trump is, he's unapologetically a white male for one reason, for one thing. And so now I have a place to be home. It's okay for me to be a white male. I'm not guilty for being a white male.
Okay.
So that's one.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two is take charge. Let's get something done. We are sick of a do nothing government.
That's true of everybody.
Everybody's sick of it, right? Donald Trump is doing something about it. He's the only one that is actually doing something about it.
Right.
So let's go back just a little bit in history. Remember the Tea Party?
Sure. Obama, 2010-ish or so, reaction to, in part, Obamacare, but the whole reaction on the
It's
right.
actually wasn't even a reaction to it. It was a reaction to, actually originally, it was a reaction actually to even the Republican Party. It was equally resentful of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And they were saying, we are done with the oligarchy. Sound
Right,
familiar? Sound kind of left? Okay.
It does. Yeah. Right.
We're
Because
done
at the
with the oligarchy, and we are done. And we
yeah,
are
at the
equally.
time, the Republicans were very pro-business. Democrats were sort of not on paper. But that was so they were saying we're against this oligarchy part of the Republican Party, but we agree with the values of the Republican Party.
Some of them, yeah.
Okay, something like that. I'm just trying to get the history.
But basically, they were saying, if you actually listen to them, they're saying we're done with the dynasties. We don't want a Bush dynasty. We don't want a Clinton dynasty. We want them all gone.
Right.
We want them all gone. And we want to actually have it be a government of the people, by the people, for them.
Kind of sounds like Bernie Sanders a little bit.
It does, doesn't it? And we actually had that revolution. We had the revolution of the left rising and the revolution of the right rising at the same time. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump. But guess what happened? The Republican Party actually went through their revolution. They actually invited Donald Trump. And what happened to the Republican Party? It's gone. It's not even recognizable. The right actually completed their revolution. And we didn't.
Interesting.
We didn't complete our revolution.
Because the revolution was a populist revolution on both sides.
Yeah.
Correct?
We're done with the dynasties. We want the people to be heard.
Interesting. That's an interesting place to.
And now we resent them because they completed their revolution and we didn't, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating, but
No, but there's certainly there is a feeling of the people that the Democrats have put forward for leadership are certainly not going to turn the system upside down. I mean, Biden's not, Kamala's not, Hillary wasn't. These are people that are products of the system. And if you love the system, then you want to vote for them. Or if you hate the other people so much, you vote for them.
you're going to vote for them, right?
But there's certainly, for a lot of people like myself, it's sort of pinch your nose and vote kind of a thing,
And so this brings up the other shadow. And so there's a shadow of, I'm opposed to whatever's going on, but there's a shadow of, I secretly wish I had that.
Right.
Right?
Right.
How many of us have thought, oh, if I ran the world, or if I was president of the United States, or if I,
Yeah, if I could be dictator for a year, what could I get done?
What would I do?
I get rid of those guns, or I would.
Donald Trump is
I would
doing
give
it.
everybody those guns, or
He's
whatever.
going to do that. And then we're upset because he's not doing it our way. But, he did it. We didn't, right? And so there might be some shadow around, it should be me. It should be my thoughts going through there. It should be my people's,
Right.
But
Well, and I think we can all
Republicans did the hard
acknowledge.
thing of creating their revolution. The left didn't.
Right, and I think we can all acknowledge that whether you agree with Trump or not, the fact that he's kicking a bunch of doors in is certainly happening.
It is.
I mean, I don't think anybody would deny that he's literally turning the American system on its head.
He sure is.
And
Sure is.
my personal viewpoint is I think we're overdue for getting turned on our head a little bit. I don't agree with the way it's happening, but I don't know. We need a shakeup. I think that's true.
He's shaking up the system, and interestingly, and again, not to come too far from a promoting the right point of view, but he says there's going to be fallout. He's actually acknowledging we're not going to get everything right.
Yeah.
But we'll do our best. We're going to shake up the system, and there's going to be some fall out and we'll try to correct it. And they fired a bunch of people and they rehired people.
Yeah.
Shit show. He's kind of acknowledging it's going to be a bit of a shit show for a while, but stick with me. It's going to be okay in the end. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I mean, he is honestly saying that. He said he'd do what he's doing. He's doing what he said he was doing.
Right.
And he's acknowledging that it's going to be a bit of a shit show and we're going to try and get it right.
Right.
That's actually, in some ways, more honest than most politicians we hear.
Right.
And I think that's what the right likes, is he says
Right.
it, he does it.
And if there's a critique on the left, I think you really hit it, which is the idea of we would like to turn the system upside down from the left's perspective.
Right,
But
exactly.
who is that person again? Well, we had the one guy, the Bernie Sanders, and then the machine sort of turned against him and
Right.
gave us Hillary instead, who might as well have been covered with corporate, like the NASCAR guys,
That's
with all
right.
the corporate patches
Exactly.
and where she took all of her money from,
Right, exactly, exactly. And that's the problem with the Democratic Party system, is they have the superdelegates,
Yeah,
which it makes it really, really hard to have a revolution.
yeah,
Makes it
Yeah.
really hard.
yeah. Well, Kim, this has been fascinating. Any final thoughts or sort of wisdom sharings here for this? I mean, we went into some interesting territory. Hopefully, we won't both get canceled because of this conversation. But
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah,
couple of white dudes sitting around talking about the world.
right, yeah. Irony is not lost on me, for sure. But really what the message is it doesn't matter who we are. If we're triggered, let's clean up our internal world, and then we can go through the world in a much more beautiful place.
I love
And
that.
when we go through the world in a beautiful place, no matter who we are happier, and the world ends up being hate begets hate, anger begets anger, judgment begets judgment, but love begets love, kindness begets kindness, compassion begets compassion. And if we just live in that world more with everybody, especially the people that trigger us. And one final story, I'll just
Yeah.
show you this. I was in a public hot tub, and this guy sat down next to me, and he said he is from northern Idaho. And I go, "Oh, you're up there with the white supremacists." He said, I'm a white separatist. And I go, "Oh, this is going to be an interesting conversation. This is about as far away from me as I want to get," right? And I said, "Oh, what's it like?" I just came from here. "What's it like being a white supremacist?" He goes, "Whoa, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm a white separatist." And I go, "Oh, tell me the difference." White supremacists believe that whites are superior. White separatists want white culture to remain white culture and not get diluted. We also want black culture to be black culture and not get diluted. We want Native American cultures to have Native American culture and not get diluted. We respect every culture. We just don't think they should mix, because you lose the diversity and the variety, because everything just becomes amalgamated. Now, what does that sound like on the left?
I mean, it sounds like a sort of a multicultural view.
Yeah, and it's cultural appropriation.
I'm uncomfortable saying
I
that.
know, right? Me too.
Right.
And look at our worldview. We say no cultural appropriation.
Right, which of course is inevitable because cultures appropriate. That's literally
Right. Exactly. But this is what he's saying. He said, don't appropriate each other's cultures.
And so part of the discomfort. So the discomfort in me is part of the same discomfort I feel when I feel it from the left, which is like, no, I think of the cultures. I personally think the cultures we should all be. What is it? You're in a soup, not a stew. Like I want to share all these cultures because I'm from the Philly. Like I enjoy being able to participate in different cultures aside from white culture.
But how often do the people that say no cultural appropriation would say, "Oh wow, I'm actually a white supremacist," or not a white supremacist, but a white separatist?
Right. So, and he meant it. I mean, it sounds like he meant it in a reasonably sophisticated way, at least from the way he presented it.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. When you hear things that you have all these biases against, if you actually come from curiosity, you might actually learn something. And I'm not supporting the worldview. I'm not supporting white supremacists, obviously.
Right. You're not advocating. Right.
He was actually disgusted with white supremacists. He hated them. But he did say, we don't want to lose our culture, and we don't want anyone else to lose their culture either. And it's like, it just blew me out of the water, literally the hot tub, to get this kind of wisdom from someone that I thought would be like the dredge of society.
Right. Fascinating. Well, and I think as sort of a final thing, it's important to note, right, that ultimately it's very true. It's sort of undeniably true that we are all projecting a human experience onto this beautiful unfolding of reality. I mean,
Right.
reality is just unfolding on its
Yeah.
own, and we're part of the show.
Right.
And everything is, in some ways, a human projection. And I know for me, when I can admit that and see that, it lets me relax quite a bit.
Yeah. That's even a next layer of projection awareness, right? When we see that even in our humanness we can project, but the very fact that we're human and we only have human senses, all we can do is project upon the world.
That's all we do.
And if we can own that, then we can just witness the workings of our mind and go, oh, look how it's stirring that storyline. Look how it's stirring that storyline.
That's right. Because I think it's important people not walk away with some sense of, oh, God, F me, I'm projecting again. Because what we're saying is, no, that's all we do is project. It's a matter of just noticing it,
Right.
owning it, right? And then with that, the projection relaxes a little bit. But I still have to call, you and I have to use language to speak to each other, which is a complete projection in and of itself, right?
Right. Language can only be a projection. It only works in linear. It doesn't work in mirror format. So like, for example, I can look at your face, I can look at a picture of you, and you can inverse the picture and it still makes sense. But if I inverse the words,
Right.
they're gobbledygook, right?
Right.
Yeah. So language can only see things through a linear perspective,
Right.
whereas vision logic can see things forward and backwards equally, and it makes sense.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
But
Well,
the
Kim,
whole
thank you.
purpose here, again, just as a summary, the purpose is not to blame anybody or say the right's good, the right's bad, the left's good, the left's bad, and none of that. It's just about if we're disturbed, there is a way to heal that leaves you in peace. And the measurement is, am I triggered by that event anymore? If I'm still triggered and having the symptoms, I haven't completed it. In terms of seeing other people a certain way, right? And the whole idea is it brings more compassion, more love, more care, and it actually helps us be more effective at supporting our values, whatever they are.
Right. Right. And I think it's a great note to end on. So if people want to know more about you, Kim, or want to sort of read, I mean, I know you I've taken some of your courses on shadow resolution, the evolution of shadow resolution, but how can people get more information on you and the work that you're up to?
You can go to kimbarta.org. There's a free shadow assessment there.
Ooh.
And so you take that shadow assessment, doesn't take long, it's like 1 minute, right? And it'll give you the percentage of your suffering based upon the type of shadow that you have.
The 3 that you talked about.
The 3 that I talked about. It'll give you your percentage of introjects, your percentage of split ego states, and your percentage of projections. And that it'll give you 100%. That doesn't mean that you're 100% in shadow. It means of your shadow, these are the percentages of introjects, projections, and split ego states that you have. You'll get a free video. You'll get a free email course that helps you work on shadow.
Great.
It's just my offering to people. And then if you want to take a course, you can. But, if anything else, you at least get that start on your life, creating a better life.
Great. All right. Well, Kim, it was great seeing you. For those that are watching on YouTube, it's great to see you. We're still working on sort of integrating the YouTube experience. So the next time I'll be able to read those comments as well. I'm still sort of spooling up my hosting skills here.
Yeah.
But the conversation was really fascinating. I really learned a lot. And I think in these polarized times, conversations like this are really helpful because ultimately we're all on the same team, right?
We're all on the same team, theoretically, right?
Well, I think actually,
We all
if the world ends, it's not going to end for one side and not the other side. I'm pretty sure.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for the work you do, Kim, and the clarity and I think this kind of work that you're up to really does actually help us clean things up as a species, both collectively and individually, and it's a big part of what I think we need to be doing. So thank you for all this work that you do.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Keith. Deeply appreciate it.
Great. Okay.